for September 27th in our regional council chambers. And the first matter that I have before me, perhaps I first should go through our roll call. Our members are present. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes from the June 21, 2019 meeting. Moved by Al, seconded by Ahmed. All those in favor? That is carried. And under new business, item 2, OPP, Town of Caledon, 2019 second quarter operational statistics analysis report. Okay, and just to follow my script accordingly, we will now refer to the OPP Caledon agenda. I need a roll call for this as well. Our members are present. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? I see none as it relates to the Caledon matter. The approval of the minutes, those have been moved already by Boughton and Attia. Inspector Garant, that's where I am now. Very good. If you could provide us with an overview of the 2019 second quarter statistics that we have before us.
Good morning, everyone. Before you have your second quarter statistics from the Caledon OPP detachment. If you have any specific questions on any of the information that's before you, I'm more than able to respond to any of your questions. Bearing that, it's before you already, so I don't think I need to go through line by line. If you have any questions.
Are there any questions at this time, members of the board? Seeing none. Then I will thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions beyond that for Inspector Garant? There are none, so I need a mover and a seconder. Ron, if you would move your seat, Mayor Brown to second that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And this concludes the Section 10 Caledon OPP agenda. And thank you to Inspector Garant for taking the time to attend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we will go right into the public board agenda. Prior to beginning our board meeting, we have a brief video highlighting the Youth in Police Initiative. Chief McCord, would you like to introduce the video, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. So every year we, as some of the board members know, we do the Youth in Policing program, and it runs over an 8-week period during the summer. And we have youth from our own communities, Brampton and Mississauga, participate with Peel Regional Police, and kindly the board approves each year that we can add an additional 5 YIPI students. So the province, they fund 20, and then the board, they fund 5 students. And we ran the program this year, and this is just a video of some of the students and their experiences, and it's from their own words. So it's an excellent video, and it's very, very short, and I thought it would be interesting to let you see.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brianna Sikdale. Today is my first day here at the YIPI program with Peel Regional Police.
Hi, it's Tyrell Joseph checking in at the first day at YIPI.
Hi, my name is Madison. It's my first day at the YIPI program. I'm really excited. I met a lot of new people, a lot of really nice police officers.
I would encourage that you spend the most time finding yourself. Who am I?
You get to explore what police officers do in their regular day.
I'm looking forward to seeing all the divisions and units. I would love to see the tactical unit, the K9 unit.
What I look forward most here is learning discipline and making new friendships and relationships with people.
You may be a little bit skeptical today, but I can assure you, you will remember this for the rest of your life, because this will actually set you up for the rest of your life.
And the moment you start to be genuinely you start to succeed in business, you start to succeed in school, you start to succeed in life. Everything you do, because you're being authentic.
Throughout the 8 weeks, I have definitely grown as a person and have seen many changes. My experience here has been so wonderful, yet so memorable at the same time.
We got a lot of experiences that we can take away and use in the future.
I really appreciate all the officers for creating this program, help run it. A lot of them really did help me and a lot of other students in the classroom to help be better individuals.
It's something very special to me and something that's going to be very hard for me to leave.
I do want to give a really big thank you to the officers, because they took a lot of time to work with us individually and together as a group. And I also got a lot of guidance from them, so it was really a pleasant experience.
Well done. Okay, thank you, Chief. So with that, I now go to our roll call for this portion of the meeting. All members are present. I believe I took, just to be sure, the approval of the minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the June 21? And it was Ahmed and Alan. And I was a little remiss in noting, under our roll call, everybody's present, but there was one additional face in the room that I didn't acknowledge. And so I will take this opportunity to acknowledge Dish Duriapa, who will be our, in my world, we call you a chief-elect, so to speak, is soon to be the new chief of the force. So welcome and good of you to sit in. Okay. With that, moving on, I'm on to the consent agenda. In accordance with the board's procedure policy, we will now move to the consent motion for the consent agenda. The consent agenda deals with items considered routine. Do any members wish to remove any items from my consent agenda numbered 3 through 11? To the board, any matters do you wish to be held from items 3 to, Madam Mayor, number 5. So we've asked to hold item 5. Seeing no others, the motion I have, number 7 as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take a moment more. So far we are holding items 5 and 7. If there are no others, the motion for me for consent is all items but 5 and 7, as moved by Mayor Crombie, as seconded by Mayor Brown. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. So with that, why don't we go right to item 5, impact of cannabis legislation. Chief or staff, anybody, any comments first before I go to the board on this report?
The reason that we have put this report on for the board purposes, Regional Council has actually asked for this report. So we thought we would bring it here to the Police Services Board before we table it with Regional Council so that you're fully informed.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Oops, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just remembering here, I believe, I'm just confirming the number. I believe in Mississauga, I'm trying to remember all the details. $300,000 to Peel, I thought, for year 1 to deal with the effects and impacts of the new cannabis legislation. So the fact that we were reimbursed 30.5, 30.6, why is it so little? What is the balance of the money used for? And maybe, Chair, maybe that was used at the Region Appeal. Maybe you could explain as well as Chief. I thought there was more money availability for policing in year 1. Mississauga does not really receive year 2 money, but it was a smaller number for us. I think Brampton does. So maybe you could go through those numbers for us and why we were, the total cost, as Mayor Brown I've heard eloquently say in the media, the far exceed what we were given to prepare for the effects of cannabis. It looks like it's $460, almost $500,000. And I believe that was 300,000. That was our share for Peel.
Yes,
I'm going to check that number
quite
while I'm
rightly,
speaking.
to the 2 mayors was brought up at the Regional Council and certainly a point of concern. Chief.
So what I can tell you, yes, there was money provided by the province, but it wasn't provided for the policing purposes. It was actually provided to the region.
Right, but that's, I thought that part of that money would go towards policing. It was 300. I've just confirmed. It was 300,000 to the region. So how was that money spent, and why wasn't it allocated to some of it to policing, and
Bonnie,
why are we out of pocket?
And Bonnie, at the present time, I'm not sure unless someone else in the room can answer for me. Perhaps Kathy can.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the $30,000 reimbursement is from the ministry in regards to purchases for our ADSE equipment and some training. The region did, like you said, receive funding. Right now, they are just asking programs to track their costs, and then at a later time, they're going to determine that allocation amongst the regional programs.
So we're hopeful that we may be reimbursed greater than $30,000 for some of the policing expenses, which I think is probably the majority of the expenses outlaid for as a result of the new cannabis legislation. But Chair, to you, as in your capacity as chair, has there been this discussion at the staff level, the impact of the cannabis legislation and the cost to the region and how that money will get allocated?
The answer to the first part, or perhaps the latter part of the question, the cost and the discussion we've had, and Madam Mayor around this table as well, and as the chiefs pointed out, what the actual cost of enforcing this is far greater than what we're actually getting. So that's something that we've got to deal with our provincial friends as well, number one. But number two, Madam Mayor, no, as of this moment, I have not had a report on how best that money devolves down from the region, but I would assure you that'd be a report that would come to regional council and we can have that
It looks
discussion.
like there is cost estimates from Dr. Hopkins of $500,000 cost each year to the region.
And as I said, Madam Mayor, and that's why I think it's disconcerting to us that we're not being made whole by our provincial peers, and I think that's the first point that we have to stress. And then, as I said, we will come back to you and all of council with how we're going to meet out the resources that we are getting.
Okay, but also, police costs in Peel were estimated to be between 6 and 9 million a year as a result of the incremental cost to us. So it looks like it's significantly less than that, which is good news, but we still want to be made whole.
Absolutely.
Right, so we have to keep that in mind when we are divvying out the funding. Because there is a note that we had estimated the cost of policing the new legislation somewhere between 6 and 9 million to us in Peel. And I'm seeing that it's almost $500,000. So that's good news, I suppose.
It's good news, but you will note in our report that we haven't gone through court processes yet.
Okay.
And those can be quite lengthy and protracted, so we haven't been able to capture that. So that still remains to be seen.
Okay. I don't know what more we can do about that. I don't know if Mayor Brown wants to comment as well. It said so far the region received its first payment of $563,000 in January, second payment of $269,000 in February, for a total of $800,000. So my $300,000 number may be off as well. So if you could cycle back and determine that, because we do want to know what the impact is to us.
Madam Mayor, quite well put. Two things we need to come back on through the chair. Number one is, are we being made whole to our actual costs as we were promised we would be? The point Patrick Brown's made as well. And number two, can we be clear on how this money is devolving through the region? Absolutely. So
Thank
both for my purposes to come back.
I'm happy to move it.
And that has been moved just as I've described it. Mayor Brown?
And just very briefly, I know we're looking at sort of the operational costs here, but having that data is helpful when we're here as a regional council and we're making our political advocacy to the province and the federal government. Like you said, Chair Nika and Mayor Crombie, the promise was that we'd be made whole, but the reality is, like in so many government programs, the funding is announced federally, it goes to the province, and somehow in that process, those that are actually responsible for protecting public safety or administering the program, the funds don't end up there. And this is yet another example. And if it's just one, it wouldn't be as significant of an issue, but this has happened dozens of times in different areas of regional responsibility, and so we need to really have the exact numbers so we can point it out when we have meetings with our provincial and federal representatives, and whether it needs to be a direct federal transfer or we can convince the province to make sure the funding is equitable. But data is key in that advocacy. So I'm glad that Mayor Crombie flagged this.
And what I'm going to do, because I think there's a question from that first, I'm going to deal with the motion, those we have it. This was here for receipt, but also to come back with the two items that we've raised, Madam Mayor. So, and I think those are understood. That has been moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mayor Brown. All those in favor? That is carried. But I think there was a follow-up question, because I think the two mayors have done a great job of advocacy of reminding our provincial and federal partners, we hear of all of these announcements, then we go back to the Home Office, this money ain't flowing down to us. So I think the mayors have done a good job of pointing that out. Chief, through to you, how is it that there seems to be this disconnect that when our provincial and federal partners make all these announcements, and then we inquire, we say, we haven't got a check yet. Could you shed some light on that?
So there's always a process that follows so that you know how to apply for the funding, and that never seems to come. We had the announcement in relation to the 65 million from federal funding, then it being given to provincial government for distribution, but there's nothing follows afterwards to say, how do you make the application? How do you follow up to be able to do that? And when you ask, well, we're getting to it, but at the time, we need it now. We need to tackle some of these problems right away, because the gun violence, the gang violence, and so on, it's ever present. Yes. And we need to get on with it.
So Chief, just to be clear, so you understand there is a process. Are we at least in the queue, or is the process fulsome enough that or not fulsome enough that you don't even know where the queue is? So are we making up, is there paperwork between, I'm just trying to understand.
The queue has not been established yet because you don't even know, the call has not been made to submit your applications. The call was made for a 5.7 million that we applied for, and then a 1.9 million. We got our 5.7 million last Friday. We're still waiting to find out if we're going to be considered for the 1.9 million application that we submitted. But that was from funding that already existed that was in the form of PEM grants. This is not from the 65 million that has been announced to tackle guns and gangs.
Yeah, and that, Madam Mayor.
So we've been doing a little work on this myself and had the opportunity to speak to the Solicitor General, Sylvia Jones, and tried to request that some of that 2020 money be expedited to us now, since the need is now and it's great now. So of the 65 million, 54 million starts in 2020 and it's federal money, and because we're in a writ period, they can't do anything about that at all. So there's another 11 million that we've asked to flow and asked to expedite, and she was going to look into that. But the 7.7 million that the chief has requested, it was separate. It was money owed to us in any case, and 5.7 of that has flowed as of last Friday, Chief. So we're very happy, but there's still outstanding, what, 1.4, 1.7, whatever it is?
1.9 million.
1.9 million still is outstanding to us. For our share, but there should be incremental money, and we should be eligible for the same funding that Toronto and Ottawa has received. I don't know why, as what the second, third largest police force in Canada, we wouldn't have, gangs don't know boundaries and borders, so this is seamless flow across our region, and so we should be eligible to work for the same funding and to work collaboratively with those forces, particularly in Toronto. I just wondered, Chief, could this uptick in the violent crime that we've been seeing, and much of it gang-related, illegal gun-related, and some of it was other organized crime-related, could it have to do with the cannabis or not have to do with cannabis? I know it's complicated and many factors and many things, but could it be as well, or?
So,
because this is exactly the problem we were trying to solve by legalizing cannabis.
It's not just isolated to cannabis. Illicit cannabis sales is part of their business. Any illegal activity is part of their business. Human trafficking is part of the business. Other drugs, cocaine and so on, is part of the business. So the illicit sales of cannabis is just a small part of it, but that isn't what's showing the increase. Okay. There's a lot of crime that leads to the increase.
Okay. So we saw it, was it last year, the year before, that the uptick again? It seems to be cyclical. Remember, we had the summit. Mississauga hosted a community safety summit on the issue, and we thought things had calmed down a little, and then this summer we saw it again, not only in Mississauga, Brampton, but right across Toronto as well. So it seemed to be an uptick in gang activity right across the region.
So what I can tell you is that there was a significant decrease right up until the end of August. As soon as we went into September, we spiked up.
And we don't know why.
And we don't, well, we're trying to establish that through the investigations to ensure that we've got the accurate information. It will take time for us to be able to establish that. When you talk about the summit that you held, a lot of that was towards Acorn Place.
That's right.
And Acorn Place has been a fantastic success.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's not a success just because of Peel Regional Police, it's a success because of the community as well. And it has been a phenomenal success.
Well, and I wanted to note the difference I don't want to compare districts, jurisdictions, but the cooperation you receive from the Malton residents to come forward and to assist you with the investigation really lightened, it was heartwarming for me to know that our residents wanted to assist their local police. There was that trust is established in the community. They wanted to work with the police and help them, assist them in the investigation. And that's not what you see everywhere across the GTA.
But to build those relationships, I can tell you through the summer, our 21 division, Superintendent Rose is here, he had his bike units he had his bike units in there building those relationships, and we get constant updates with respect to that. So they had, that's the benefits that we're reaping today. It's an unfortunate circumstances that's caused it.
Tragedy.
But when it comes to do it, the community works with us.
Yeah. And that's a big difference from other regions. So I'm very proud of that our residents have trust in their Peel Regional Police and are willing to assist in the investigations. And as you say, it's the trust you've built up and the good relations. So we thank you there. I think that was all I wanted to talk about on the gun. You were going to mention the videos later, or is that an in-camera matter? And how these gangs communicate to each other? Granted. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Mayor Crombie. And going forward again then, so we dealt with the first two items, but I think there's another one here that perhaps we can get a report back on for the next meeting, and that is this. I want to be clear on all the funding envelopes that exist, the checks that are in the mail or are not in the mail, and at least we can be clear on a matrix or a schematic that say, here's what they've done, because they just go crazy announcing things, and then we come back home and the chief says, I don't even know where the queue or the lineup is or the applicant. If we could just be definitively clear on all of that, because then we know what the ask is. And I'm known for my candor. I think one of the problems we also have is, and I'll grant them this, elections are funny times for these types of things, and it is remarkable, even if it's federal, your provincial counterparts don't want to do much of anything because they don't want the wrong party to get credit, etc. So things kind of come to a standstill. I understand that. I'm not happy about it. But let's get a game plan so that at least we know where the queue are, where the lines are, and we can get that check in the mail. So if, with the board's indulgence, I would love that to come back. Mayor Crombie.
So in my conversation with Minister Jones, Sylvia Jones, she did give me a list of other funding opportunities, and I made copious notes and left them in the car, but one of them was something called Cisco, I think.
You're talking about CISO.
CISO.
Yeah. That's a different source of funding because you have to apply for that. It's for investigations, specific investigations.
Right.
And we have filed numerous applications, and we're generally very successful.
Good.
We've received one, we're anticipating another one, so that's not a problem.
There were a number of envelopes, but you don't always know, and they open and then they close, and you weren't even aware that the money was available and you should apply.
Yes.
And it's closed before you realize it.
Our staff are very alive to every time funding becomes available, and we're in there right in the front.
And I'll send you a note on the list that's in my car that she listed for me.
And Madam Mayor, thanks again. I think that's so important that as opposed to just direction, I'd like a motion from Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown that at the next meeting we have a full report matrix understanding of here's where all the announced funding envelopes are, here's how the continuum shakes down, and here's how you get your check and the checks that we are or are not getting. I think that would be very helpful under the circumstances. Madam Mayor and the Mayor, very good. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of that motion? That is carried. Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, that brings me to item 7 that you've asked us to hold, 2018 Peel Police Services Board Community Support and Recognition Fund. And there is a recommendation of receipt. Madam Mayor.
Yeah. No issue with any of this. Just some questions from my councillors on what this fund is and what it does and where the proceeds come from and what the criteria is to qualify, because now that they've seen or know this exists, because I think a few of the councillors have applied, some have been successful, some not, so they all want to know how they can qualify for funding and what the fund is. Where does the money come from?
So I can answer some of that. So the fund itself is established through the Police Services Act, and the funding itself comes from the proceeds from the sale of unclaimed personal property and money found and seized by the police service. That money is seized through the chief and then transferred to the board for the board's use in a way that the board considers in the public interest. So we have a policy that determines how that money is used, and we use it under a number of categories, including community relations, which makes up the bulk of the special event sponsorships. To your question about how councillors can be approved, so the funding doesn't go to councillors. No councillors seek funding. These come from community groups. Some of the community groups have been in the past encouraged by some councillors to come to the board. And as long as it's a community group that has a sponsorship opportunity and that the funding is used for sponsorship and not used to offset operating costs, then it falls with, and that it falls within the policy, then we would fund it. And then the policy, the report today is also the account of the annual report, financial statements done through an external accountant, and they determine whether or not how the funding was used aligns itself with both the legislation and the policy. And once again, the accountant has shown that, in fact, all the funding was within both the law and the policy.
Okay, that's terrific. And I did scan, and I see we're all doing that now. So property seized, it was up almost 87%. And I think that was one large cache that was left behind somewhere. All right, so that's not typical. Okay, and I think we're all looking at the list, and there's no question with the groups were worthy, and it was good expenditure. I was just, of course, had to take back to my folks to explain how, why, and who was eligible and who wasn't, and where the money came from. So just a lot of questions to some of the newer councillors.
And if I can add one last thing. So the board in 2018, so the previous composition of the board, actually made changes to the policy to sort of ease the restrictions on how the funding could be used. In the past, it was almost exclusively used for sponsorship at events. But because of the changes to the policy, the board's been able to do some other things with the funding, including sponsoring the Special Olympics that Peel hosted.
That's right.
In 2017. And then last year, some funding went to expanding the Yippee program. It also went to what the right word is, refurbishing the Peel Children's Village, and that there will be further requests, I believe, coming from the chief to continued operations and maintenance of the Peel Children's Village as well.
And allows our Peel Police to have a presence at many of the community events as well, right? Because certainly that has to be funded somewhere.
Correct.
Great. Okay, I'm happy to move that now. It's just I wanted the explanations so that my folks were aware.
Thank you. Any other questions of members of the board? Madam Mayor, I'll put a fine line on it because it did jump out at me as I was reading to think that we have 1.4 million, but the report made very, very clear as the mayor, there was an exceptional circumstance that is going to linger for many, many, many years, as I understand it. So we really can't count on it. So it's really half of what's here because some of it is frozen, if you will, for almost a decade, and that was the one-time situation that we're going to have to live with. So I don't want everybody reaching for the regional chair to say, what are we going to do with all this money? But I expect the inquiries. With that, Madam Mayor's moved it, seconded by Ron. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And with that, we have dealt with all the matters on consent or individually. We now go to, will there be any announcements from members of the board at this time, or do they have any questions or announcements? Seeing none, I go to deputations. With regards to deputations, we have one deputant today, Ms. Ursula Cooper-Bennett, on the topic of, and maybe I should introduce this more formally. As promised, I asked Ursula if she wanted to come in and talk to me at some point, because she and I go back quite a while, and she did. We had a very good conversation, went over a lot of the history of the region of Peel, and I commended her for her efforts that I think are well-intentioned. I reminded her that those same well-intentions come through the board and all of our officers as well. And I think she respects that and appreciates that. Have there been some challenges in the past? There have, but I think our conversation was one of you move forward, and what a great day to bring that up, that we have a whole new administration here on our side of the services side, the civilians and the politicians, and some changes on the board, and we're moving forward. And in that spirit, she said, well, I would like to make one more deputation, but instead of race and race data, as she thought, and Madam Mayor, I think you'll be pleased with this appropriately, to talk about Malton and going forward in Malton. And I thought that was a very nice gesture, and I said I would welcome that. So, Ursula, you're up. Okay. but thank you for that. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome, thank you. Did you want to show the video now, or did you? Very good, and we will take that as your deputation. So if we can cue that up accordingly. Thank you. Don't fix the blame, fix the problem.
With the greatest of respect, the problem is that freedom of information keeps uncovering more problems, most of them entrenched, systemic, and far beyond my ability to deal with.
It's time to move along and say, what are the best practices going forward? How have we learned from the past?
Now, the past I can help you with, and you don't even have to take my word for it. Here's Malton, video and freedom of information from the past.
It should be noted that original number was 40. However, you will see in a report that we will be tabling at this board meeting that we are recommending the closure of the community station in Malton. The workload within that community station doesn't equal out the cost efficiencies of having that officers work in a community station. So,
Councillor Parrish.
Everybody knows about the tragedy in Malton, and it's the region of Peel that actually controls the budget for the Police Services Board. I just want to serve notice to everybody that when they closed down my community police station up there in 2018, I fought it hard. That was nothing compared to what I'm going to do now.
I did have a conversation with Jonathan's mother yesterday, and she's, of course, living every parent nightmare, brokenhearted as you would expect. And I think the father is equally crushed and not taking calls right now.
Councillor Parrish, I applaud your pushing for that station. As you know, there was a police station planned, and actually Councillor Carlson and I were approached, and neither one of us can remember which chief. I think it was Chief Metcalf. We were approached because there was land which is now the paramedic station at Thomas and Erin Mills Parkway, and that land was purchased many, many years ago for a police station, full-size police station for the west end of the city. The chief approached the two of us because it served our communities and pointed out the fact that at that time there was a huge need in Malton and less of a need in the Meadowvale and Streetsville area. We had 11 Division at the time. And the agreement was that if we agreed to move the police station to Malton and not build it at Thomas and Erin Mills Parkway, what I had asked for was a community station for Meadowvale. The chief at the time agreed, and it was kind of I want to say a deal maker, but you know, we were going to support it moving up to Malton regardless, but that was when we opened the very first community station. And it was solely based on the fact and the need in Malton at that time. And it's extremely disappointing that the Police Services Board did not proceed with constructing that police station in Malton, because we were given statistics at the time. And back then, both Meadowvale and Malton had the highest percentage in the entire region of youth, concentrated youth. I had it around the town center, and Malton had it in Malton itself, in the downtown. So the need was there then. The station was supposed to be built. And unfortunately, the money, as you say, was diverted to build the Emil Cope Center, which, given the fact that the need had, I mean, the statistics were there, and it didn't happen. And I think that's very disappointing.
I'd like to know more about the breakdown of your statistics into adults and students and young people.
Mayor McCallion requested those Malton youth statistics from Peel Police back in October 2008. And given my own experiences, I suspect she's still waiting on them.
In 1994, there's a number of recommendations that came forward. We've learned from that because they essentially died stillborn because of lack of funding. So I think one of the things, the reason it's here for approval in principle is really so that we can ensure that whatever we do produce at the end of the process is deliverable. So it's not just one approach, but I think it's a more holistic approach. And as Mayor Fennell said, Peel tends to be far more active and proactive these days than in the past. But I think we need to continue with that to achieve the kind of success that we require.
Any other comments?
Chief, just in summary, Peel Regional Police is ready.
This board is ready, this community's ready. So when we move forward on this kind of a summit, we're truly going to have the opportunity to not just have a deliverable, but whether it's working with the provincial government, the federal government, at the end of the day, we're serving the citizens of Peel or Canada. As chair of the Ontario Federal Caucus of FCM, people look to Peel for solutions. They say when Peel gets moving, the rest of us copy Peel because good things happen. We'll come out with a model and with specific targets and goals, and if it's specific to the provincial government for funding or the federal government, then we'll continue to carry those through. It'll be more than a summit. It'll be the beginning of the end of what we've seen in this spike this year. It's the end of the spike. It must not be a trend.
Part of the problem with construction with Peel Regional Police is that decisions for the buildings are made by the Police Services Board, but the buildings are actually owned by the Region of Peel. But the Region of Peel staff or council has very little, if any, input into what is being built or where it's being built.
Given the newest revelations, it should come as no surprise that I filed freedom of information, one with Peel Police, the other with the board, requesting, quote, statistics, pages and pages of rationale for a police station in Malton, as compiled by Chief Noel Catney and Peel Police, example, Deputy Chief Mike Metcalf, and any related Peel Police documents and reports circa 1994 to 2005, relating to the, quote, huge need in Malton, unquote, for a police station. Include search for reports sent to the Peel Police Services Board Facility Committee.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Would it be appropriate also, given that you are in the process, I understand, of having some federal or provincial money for police, extra police, to have the issue of youth drop-in centers referred to the police board so they could look at hiring more police who are specially trained to deal with youth and could possibly be manning some of these stations? Because Councillor Adams said she doesn't want this thing bouncing around for 12 months.
Let me just say it this way. We as the Police Service Board don't direct the chief or the officers.
It was a poor decision to close the substations around the region of Peel. And I know the citizens feel it was a poor decision. Those of us on council feel it was a poor decision. And I'm afraid that some of those decisions are going to come back and haunt us now and in the future. So if we can fix it now, then we should be doing that. And I certainly hope the Police Services Board is going to take some action on this, because they're the ones that are making these decisions.
Thank you very much. And you might want to stand in place. I know you wouldn't leave. I'm going to receive your deputation, but the mayor has a motion that speaks to this. And Madam Mayor, once I've dealt with this deputation, it's all of my deputations. I think I might go right to your motion.
I was going to ask you to move it forward.
And you can speak to the broader issue. So I will thank you for your presentation. If I could have receipt of the presentation, moved by Len and Madam Mayor. All those in favor? That is carried. What that brings me to now then, after deputations, is other business. The mayor will be presenting a motion to us. Madam Mayor, I think this is the appropriate time to do so. I don't know if I can get it up on the screen. And Madam Mayor, if you could speak to your motion, please.
I wonder if hard copies were distributed, because Mayor Brown doesn't have one. Do you all have one? Yep, you have one? Okay.
But normally, I don't know if my staff can help me. Normally, we put it up on the screen at Regional Council. No.
We don't have that ability.
Okay, Matt, I'll tell you what I'm going to do then. I think.
I'll read it. I'm happy to.
Do the people in the audience know the resolution that I'm speaking to?
I'm happy to read it.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, why don't you read it first?
And it'll be moved by myself and seconded by Mayor Brown, I believe? Yes? Okay. So two of us are going to put this forward. And this speaks to, maybe Malton was a trigger, but it speaks to a larger issue as well. So we're asking pretty much for a service review and also a feasibility study in the future. So it is whereas Peel Regional Police 5-division model, including the airport division, has become outdated given the significant growth in both Mississauga and Brampton. And whereas the Peel Police Services Board and Peel Regional Police are currently developing a new 3-year strategy plan. Whereas Peel Police Services Board recently appointed a new police chief, which presents an opportunity for a review of existing police operations And whereas Peel Police Services Board, on the recommendation of Peel Regional Police, have closed 11 community police stations since 2010, and whereas the Malton Community Station was the most recent community station to close, and whereas a tragic shooting in Malton took the life of an innocent 17-year-old bystander, and whereas the Mississauga community of Malton falls under the jurisdiction of 21 Division in Brampton, and whereas at least 12 minutes passed before police arrived on the scene of Malton shooting, and whereas the Malton community is geographically isolated, a priority neighborhood in need of targeted support to help deal with issues including, I'd like to add, youth at risk, if I may, gambling, human trafficking, and guns and gangs. Therefore, be it resolved that Peel Police Service Board, I forgot my glasses today, sorry, request that Chief of Police and Peel Regional Police work with the board to undertake a comprehensive review of the current operating model to determine whether the 5-division model requires expansion, and that particular consideration be given to a standalone police station in the community of Malton. I think we're going to entertain a friendly amendment following. The board further requests that Peel Regional Police focus on adequate and effective police representation in the community when completing the strategic plan. Recommendations should be presented to the Police Services Board for a decision in early 2020. That's the motion, and I know there are a number of folks want to make comment, and I think the chief actually would like to make some comments as well.
Why don't we start with the chief first with regards to receiving that motion and your thoughts?
So I would agree with you, Mayor. This is very timely. It really does present as an opportunity. Just for the record, in relation to the airport division, the airport property is actually owned by the Greater Toronto Airport Authority, and we provide those officers through an agreement.
So should I make it the 4-division model?
I think it should be the 4 divisions. Then I did pull up some records with respect to 1997. There was a Malton Community Station opened, but there was a plan prior to that for a Malton division. And there is records of that, myself going back to try and find that to speak to it, so I can confirm that. I would like to go to one of the items where you talk about 12 minutes passed before police arrived at the incident, the shooting incident. I have pulled up the incident, and what I can tell you is the first officer arrived on scene in 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And actually the supervisor who became in charge of it arrived in 6 minutes and 49 seconds. I don't know who provided you with the information, but you can imagine that the area was quite large and there was a lot of chaos. So some people may not have realized that police were already on scene because they were dealing with so much when they arrived on scene.
Probably what happened. People didn't realize.
So that I think that would be helpful to clarify that. And then the rest of it, I don't have any other additional comments. I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Moving on, Mayor Brown.
First of all, let me commend Mayor Crombie for speaking out on behalf of her community for what was obviously a tremendously traumatic event in Malton, and speaking to the need we have for heightened public safety in Peel region. I know we've had similar events in Brampton, and I know when we faced that trauma, Mississauga has always been there in a supportive manner. And just like when this happened in Malton, I know the residents of Brampton really, their hearts went out to to the families in the neighborhood affected. I look at this motion and I think it's long overdue to look at this. I assume that Mayor Crombie will take the friendly amendment to adjust the number, taking the airport reference out and the 12-minute line out, just to be consistent with accurate information. And what I'd like to add in, and Mayor Crombie said she'd be supportive, is adding in North Brampton after it says the community of Malton. and North Brampton. And so when we're looking at this throughout the whole region of Peel, you can look at where we need to do better, maybe on response times. I think the Malton incident's an opportunity. You always want to learn from a traumatic event like this to really look at where we want as a police force to have faster response times. And if we look at this in the areas that we're getting some of that concern brought up to us, whether it's Malton or North Brampton, having this introspective look, I think will be helpful. And that's a friendly amendment. Perfect.
Accepted.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Len, were you? Please.
Yes, I'd just like to add, if possibly, in regards to the inquiry, the adequate and police representation in the community, if we could also add deployment of officers in the field, and we could investigate that, not only officers that are assigned, but actually end up on assignment as patrol officers in the field.
So I think that that is accounted for because we're looking at the operating model. So how our resources deployed would be part of the operating model. I think that's why I left it vague.
Great. I just want to make sure deployment included actually operating in the field as opposed to just a patrolled officers in patrol.
Let me just ask the chiefs if the wording's sufficient. When we say current operating model, comprehensive review of the operating model, if that includes deployment of resources.
It would because the two intermingle. Because you're going to have to look at the number of officers that are assigned to those divisions. So you would have to do both of them together.
I just wondered if we captured the essence of doing the service review in the way I've described it as the current operating model.
Unless you wanted to add, Mayor, this service delivery model.
What I'm referring to, Chief, is if 40 officers are assigned to a platoon, how many of those officers actually end up on the road to be assigned to a call?
So that would be the service delivery model.
Okay, I'm adding service delivery model. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chatha.
Chair, I agree with both Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown on this, and I want to thank Mayor Crombie for taking the friendly amendment to add North Brampton, because I attend, as my personal capacity as a resident, a town hall meeting recently right after the Malton unfortunate incident, and there was lots of concerns came from the North Brampton. So I just want to speak on that. It's good to review at the same time.
Thank you. If there are no other speakers, perhaps I could just add, first of all, in fully supporting the motion and commending Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown for their vigilance and being so outspoken for their communities, and rightly so. But I do think just some context and some history, and this is kind of a seminal moment because it really speaks to the roles of us over here as civilians and elected officials and the staff that perform the duties. You've heard me say before, and I quip, but I mean it sincerely, since I've been around since 1988, my blessing and my curse is I know where the bodies are and I know how they got there. So to correct Councillor Sato, the fact of the matter is when the community stations came in, like one of the first one, my own in Cooksville, that I managed to get free rental space for, that it went in, it was a tough day on behalf of the chief to call me years later and say, Nando, we think we've got to start getting rid of these things. Why? And it was explained in some detail that they really became, my words, not theirs, community coffee shops. And people just walked in and wanted to chew the fat with a few officers. The bad news was that was 3 officers that weren't out on the street doing policing. So to correct Councillor Sato, that's why I supported the motion to close mine. If I can say, when the one regarding Square One came up, what was said, and I remember the phrase distinctly, they didn't do policing anymore, they sort of became the mall police. So that mall owners were always running, so they weren't doing a lot of proactive policing. The other one that I remember, again, because I've been around a long time, is when we thought bicycle patrols were all the rage. And we went to town on them, and then we found out, is it the most effective form of policing? And so the point that I want to make is, and the chief is being charitable, in fact, we were overlooking a facilities review as we speak. So the staff's been doing their job in dealing with it. But what I want to caution is there's a reason why we're the advocates for our community, and situations like this concern us, and the mayor, I think, has handled it marvelously. There's a reason why we have a professional law service here, an enforcement service here, because they understand how best to deal with it. So I don't know how best to mete out our resources, but I do know we sense where the troubles are on the street and we bring them to you. And our chief and the new chief and the staff have to say, if you're asking us how best to deal with it, very appropriately asked, let us come back to you and tell you what the most effective form of policing is, and let's have that conversation. Because I do not want to be in a position where, with all the uniqueness of Malton and all of the uniqueness of Brampton, which I support fully, all of a sudden a shot's fired in Port Credit. Well, we had a shot fired too, where's our station? It really isn't as simple as all that, and that's why you need analysis, policy, and procedures, and the experts telling us, we know what your problem is, we think this is the appropriate solution, let's bring it back to the board and discuss it. And Madam Mayor, that's exactly what you're doing, and I think that has to be recognized. But as always, there's a history and there's a reason, and there's reasons why we've ended up where we are, and we have to be cognizant of that. And I conclude by saying, as I said to Ursula, and that's in the rearview mirror, we've learned from it, we will be judged on how we go forward. So with that, Madam Mayor, very appropriately put, it's been seconded by Mayor Brown.
Yeah, we've made all the initials and all the changes.
Perhaps, Madam, to be 100% clear, if you would like me, why don't you reread, just to be clear on what is coming forward.
Moved
Thank
by
you.
Bonnie Crombie, second by Patrick Brown. Whereas Peel Region Police 4-division model has become outdated given the significant growth in both Mississauga and Brampton, and whereas Peel Police Services Board and Peel Regional Police are currently developing a new 3-year strategic plan, and whereas the Peel Police Services Board recently appointed a new chief, which presents an opportunity for a review of existing police operations, and whereas the Peel Police Services Board, on the recommendation of Peel Regional Police, have closed 11 community police stations since 2010, and whereas the Malton Community Station was the most recent community station to close, and whereas a tragic shooting in Malton took the life of an innocent 17-year-old bystander, and whereas the Mississauga community of Malton falls under the jurisdiction of the 21 Division in Brampton, and whereas significant time passed before police arrived on the scene of the Malton shooting, and whereas the Malton community is geographically isolated, a priority community in need of targeted support to deal with the issues including youth at risk, gambling, human trafficking, and guns and gangs. Therefore, be it resolved that Peel Police Services Board requests the Chief of Police and Peel Regional Police work with the board to undertake a comprehensive review of the current operating and service delivery model to determine whether the 4-division model requires expansion, and that particular consideration be given to a standalone police station in the community of Malton and in northern Brampton. The board further requests that Peel Regional Police focus on adequate and effective police representation in the community when completing the strategic plan. Recommendations should be presented to the Police Services Board for decision in early 2020. Maybe I'll just add perception that significant time passed. Okay. Whereas a perception.
Very good. As moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mayor Brown. You've heard the motion. Are there any speakers to the motion? I will call the vote at this time. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you all. Ursula, thank you for your presentation. And just in terms of the paperwork, that has dealt with item 13. I go back now to item 12, update to the disposition of land at 7750 here Ontario Street, Brampton for the Metrolinx LRT project. Chief, would you like to speak to the report?
So, Chair, the reason that we've brought this to the board is because it's been to the board before for the procurement of property for the new LRT line that would be going up Highway 10. It has to move some of our cabling, our fiber optics and so on, plus it is going to disrupt our business somewhat. We're just bringing it as an information to make you aware of this, that we are having to give up a little bit more property than we had in the past. And when this happens, it also closes one of our exits from the division. But our staff are working with Metrolinx to make sure there is no interruption to policing service and the fact of we can still carry on business as we should do, because we have our communication centre at this location, and that is vital to maintain that particular service in our 911 services.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, I need a mover and a seconder. Mr. Boughton, seconded by Mr. Howell. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. With that, before we conclude, I think we have a good news story, Chief. I'm aware of the information regarding Hurricane Dorian and the help that we provided. You might like to tell us a little bit more about that.
So our police officers are involved in many charities and supporting our communities. And I just wanted to bring to your attention, one of our detective sergeants, Don Jorgensen, is part of Global Medics. And when Hurricane Dorian occurred in the Bahamas, he immediately stepped up and volunteered to go to the Bahamas to assist. He's been deployed there now since the hurricane happened, and is part of the services trying to deal with the tragedy and trying to assist. But I just wanted to bring it forward that our police officers, much that they're in public service on a continual basis, their public service goes far beyond this. In fact, now it is extended to international service, and I just wanted to raise that as a good news story.
Thank you very much, and well done. Okay, with that, this concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board meeting. We will now adjourn. Actually, members, if I may, it says to adjourn 5 minutes, but I think we're going to stick right with it. It hasn't been that burdensome for the first hour. So other than excusing those people who do not need to be with us in camera, I will thank you for your attendance, and then we will go right into the ongoing business. And thank you for attending.